Hi, I'm Bob Tabor with Developer University. For more of my training videos for beginners, please visit me at devu.com. Previously, I said that the creator of the console window project template, whenever we go File, New Project, and we select console application or console window project, it added references to the parts of the .NET Framework class library that we might find useful. However, if there was a need for some class that didn't reside in the assemblies that were by default referenced in our project template, then we could add a reference to it ourselves. And the way that we would do that, and you can see I just have a little throwaway application that I'm calling typical console application. The way that you can do that is to select the references node inside of the Solution Explorer, right-click and select Add Reference, and that'll pop up the Reference Manager. And you'll see that there are a number of different categories here. We'll choose Assemblies and Framework. And here you can see all of the assemblies that are part of the .NET Framework class library. You can see some of them already have little check marks next to them indicating that we already have references to those. Now, many of these, I don't know that anybody has used them all. There's just so many of them, and you only choose the ones that you need for your specific application. Some of them are specific to types of application, whether it be a Windows or a web application. Some of them deal specifically with data, accessing data from a database or accessing data in the cloud. Some of them have to do with just security. Some of them have to deal with there's just everything you can possibly think of. It's going to be represented here in one of these. So if I needed one of these, what I could do is just find it. For example, system.data.link. I might want it to create or maybe SQL XML. I want to work with XML and save it in a SQL database. I might then add that reference by clicking the checkbox next to it and then selecting the OK button, and now it's added that reference to my application. I can use all of the classes and namespaces inside of that if I need it. Now, if I wind up not needing it, I don't have to worry about removing the reference. This is really just a convenience for compilation. The .NET compiler, the Visual Basic compiler, is smart enough to know that we really didn't need a reference to that particular assembly. And we didn't use any of the namespaces or the classes inside of that assembly, so it'll safely ignore it on its own. All right. Now, that's one way that we can get those additional libraries that were created by Microsoft for specific purposes into our application. But there's also a wealth of free open source libraries that are created by third-party companies and teams of individuals that provide many common features that we might want to add to our application. And so the repository for those open source projects is NuGet. And what we can do is go to Tools and go to the NuGet Package Manager. And while we could use the Manager console, I recommend that you, starting out, use the Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. This will open up a visual editor. And what we can do is browse for a specific type of library. Perhaps we know the name of the library that we want to use. Let's say I want to add some logging capabilities to my application. I might choose this Log4Net, and there's a bunch of different ones, but I might select it and then say, oh yeah, I want to add that to this project, this typical console application. And I want to install the latest stable version of it, but there are some other options that I could choose from down here. I'm just going to go ahead and click install. And now it's going to grab down all of the assemblies and references to other dependencies that I would need in order to use that Log4Net library of functionality inside of my application. So I just wanted to show you how to use it. We won't be using Log4Net, but you can see that it's now been added to as a reference inside of my project. It's also copied down some of those library files into the actual project. Here, let me find it real quick. Look for typical console application. And here you can see that there's a packages folder where we have the Log4Net And there's a bunch of different versions of it. And then when we go to actually utilize it and compile it in our application, it'll show up in our debug directory as well. At this point, we haven't added any references to the DLL, so there's no need for the compiler to copy the library over into our debug folder. So at this point, we don't even we don't see it. But I just wanted to make you aware of the NuGet Package Manager. But then there's a third scenario where we might want to create our own library of code to reuse within our own company or within the projects that we work on individually. Maybe we could even open source them and distribute them to others through NuGet at some point. So what I want to do is create a code library. We haven't done that up to this point. And I want to use some of that logic from 2 lessons ago where we were actually able to go out online, grab all the HTML off of my website. And what I also want to do is not only display it in a console window, but also save it into a text file. And we'll call that something like scrape web page. All right. So what I'm going to do is create first of all, a new project, and this time I'm not going to choose console application. Instead, I'm going to choose class library. And we'll call this class library my code library. All right, something very generic. We'll click OK. And yeah, we can save off the changes we made there. Okay, as you can see, this code library only has a class. I could rename this class something like, oh, I don't know, my class. Again, very generic. And here what I'm going to do is create a public function scrape web page as string. All right. It doesn't like the name my class. Let's call it the scrape class. And so then we'll create a scrape web page function. And here what I'm going to do is just start off by using the web client. So we'll go a dim client as new web client. Of course, it won't be able to find it. I'm going to hit Control period on my keyboard to import the system.net namespace. And the next thing I'll do is go dim reply as string equal to client.download string, and we're going to pass in something into the scrape web page function. So we'll go by val, let's go URL as string. So we'll pass that URL into the download string. That should work. And next we're going to do a, I guess we won't do the console.write line. We'll just return the string, or actually reply. There we go. And the next thing we're going to do is also go file dot write all text. I happen to know that that's what I need from the system.io namespace. So we're going to import system.io. So write all text, and then we're going to give it a path. So I'll just go ahead and pass in a path. That'll be the second item that we're going to need to pass in by val path as string. All right, and so let's go ahead and pop those on different lines. And I have to also give it what I want to write. So in this case, we'll write the reply, and then we'll return the reply. So hopefully that will work. Let's go ahead and build the solution. And what I'm going to do is change this from the debug to the release version. So the debug version creates extra code that allows Visual Studio to attach to it. The release version is when I'm finished with my code and I may want to distribute it and use it in other projects or actually put it on somebody else's computer. So I go ahead and select the release configuration, and then I'm going to choose build solution, and it should build into the release, the /bin/release folder mycodelibrary.dll, as you can see here, and it looks like it succeeded. So what we'll do now is actually create a new project to utilize that class library, and I'm going to call this my client and click OK. And here what we're going to do is actually add a reference to that DLL that I just created. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. I'm actually going to right click and select add reference again, and this time what I want to do is just use the browse feature, and you can see that it found that I currently have this DLL in my users Bob Documents Visual Studio 2015 projects, my code library, and so on, because it's under the recent DLLs that I created. But if it wasn't, I'd have to use the browse feature, and I'd have to go and search using this open dialog to find that DLL somewhere on my hard drive, and that's not going to be as pleasant. There's a lot of friction in that experience. This time, just for the sake of illustration, I'll go ahead and use this recent item, but I probably would have to use the browse in order to find that DLL on my hard drive. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to need to create an instance of Scrape. So dim my Scrape as new Scrape, and it doesn't see Scrape in the IntelliSense. So clearly I did something, you know what I need to do? Control period. And I need to import the my code library namespace into my module1.vb. Why? Because the default name for my namespace is the name of the project. So I need to import the namespace for the code library I created that contains the Scrape class, and then it will be able to see it. All right. So now I have a reference to my Scrape, and I should be able to do like dim result as string equals my Scrape dot scrape web page. There we go. And let's give it a URL and then a path where we want to save the file. So the URL will be http://www.devview.com, and then we'll use for the path C:/. I think I have an example folder where I've been saving some things. Example devview.txt, and that result will come back. I'll do a console.writeLine just to show that we can actually get that string back, and I'll do a console.readLine, and now I have hopefully successfully used the code library that I created in the previous step. So let's go ahead and run the application. Whoa, we got a problem. There's a syntax error where, let's go ahead and add an underscore there. Probably should have done it like this instead. And then we'll add that there. Okay, let's try and run it now. There we go. All right, so we grabbed all the text pretty quick. I'll go ahead and hit enter to finish that. And now let's take a look at the example folder. There should be a devview.txt, and there is, and it has my entire web page. So that's how you can create a library with functionality to scrape web pages off the internet and waste everybody's bandwidth. But at any rate, you can see that it was made pretty easy by the fact that we were able to add a recent item. But what I'd like to do is actually recreate this project really quickly and just show you how to create this project. So we're going to call this the Scrape, Web Scrape, I'll call it. Web Scrape, and click OK. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow this Web Scrape project to be the console window application, and then I'm going to add another project to it. So I'm going to go to File, Add a new project, and I'm going to create a class library, which I'm going to call my code library. All right, it should put it in the Web Scrape folder. And here we go. I'm going to call this scrape. And here we'll go public function scrape web page as string. And I tell you what we're going to do. I'm just going to pause the video, copy and paste the code in here from the previous project. So let's go ahead and pause the video now. All right, so you can see that I've got two projects. The code library project will have a class called Scrape with my Scrape web page functionality in it. And I have a second project that will actually be the consumer of that code library. And here we'll go and utilize it by going, let's go scrape, and I'm going to hit Control period on my keyboard, and it doesn't see it. Well, what we need to do, as you can see, is use one of the options near the bottom, import my code library from my code library. All right. And so that will fix the issue, and it created a reference all in one shot. You can see it added the reference here as well. Very cool. All because it's right inside of the same solution. So let's go and do a dim my scrape equals new scrape, and then we'll go dim result as string equals my scrape dot scrape web page. Here we'll pass in the URL like we did before. Let's grab something different like Microsoft.com, and then we'll save it here c:/example/microsoft.txt, and then we will go console.writeLine, passing in result, and then console.readLine, like so. And now let's run the application. And we're able to get back the Microsoft homepage. And if we were to navigate over to our example folder, we have a Microsoft.txt that has the web page in it. Great. Okay, so like I said, in larger projects, it's likely that you want to keep multiple projects into the same solution when they're somehow related. Here we've split up the functionality and created a shared code library, but we were able to access it then from another project whose purpose is to actually do the to call into that code library and then to actually show stuff on screen, save it to a hard drive, all that kind of stuff. But this is the exact scenario where using multiple projects inside of a single solution makes sense. So to recap, in this lesson, we talked about how to create a reference to other parts of the .NET Framework class library if they're not already added in by default, depending on the project template that you've selected. We talked about how to reference other free and open source assemblies that are created by other companies, a group of developers, or even Microsoft has some of their libraries out there on NuGet as well. We looked at how to create our own code library, which we did that for the first time, and then how to access it from our app. And then we looked at a second version of that where we actually created a solution containing both the client and the library in the same solution right here. And we were able to easily make a reference from the client to the code library in just one step by hitting Control period on our keyboard, that quick access step that we got in from IntelliSense, and it did everything for us in one shot. It was very convenient. Okay, so hopefully that's insightful, and that helps you to understand how developers really work with splitting out the responsibilities of their application into multiple files for reusability's sake, for maintenance sake, and then also for distribution through other channels like NuGet or whatever the case might be. All right, so hopefully that helps, and we'll continue on and talk about collections in the next lesson. We'll see you there. Thanks.